An LAPD sheriff follows a suspected thief to Europe in an attempt to team up with him for a robbery, is the exact description I found on Wikipedia about Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm leaving the theater. All right, this is Ronald, and I am leaving the theater after seeing Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. Written and directed by Christian Gudegast, starring Gerard, Butler, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Evin, Ahmad, Salvatore, Esposito, Meadow, and Swen, Temmel. And for a complete cast listing, as always, you can go to the link in our show notes. It is just me today. So Den of Thieves 2 is a sequel to Den of Thieves, which came out in 2018. We were very different people back then. It was starring some of the same people I mentioned, like Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr., but it also had Pablo Schreiber, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, Max Holloway, a lot of others also in this film. In this film, and this is the original film, follows the plot of these thieves that are trying to do this heist and the cops that are after them. It is very much like Heat or The Town or any other movie that begins with a heist. And then there's a cat and mouse game throughout the whole movie, but then there's kind of a twist at the end, which, I mean, you could argue whether it's really a good twist or not, but it is a twist. It is a twist. So we get to this one, Den of Thieves, Pantera. And in this film, oh man, it's, once again, we're following the main character played by Ice Cube Jr., aka O'Shea Jackson Jr. If you've watched the trailer for this film, there's a conversation taking place between him and Gerard Butler, who is the cop that follows him, named Nick. Y'all can look up their names later. They're not important enough to remember in this review. I just left the theater. How am I gonna remember names? I gotta write this stuff down. Anyway, essentially, this movie features them joining forces to take on a heist together, in which they have to go after other obstacles. Let me just start off by saying this movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes long. It's too long. It's too long to do what it's doing. At one point, this movie has an identity crisis, because at one point it purports that it is just a regular like retribution movie. Let's go find the guy that did the thing. Let's re-find him, that type of thing. And then it turns into like a buddy cop movie for a little bit. And then it kind of turns into it kind of reverts back to a heist film, but like an ensemble heist cast. But nothing that it does in this film, any of those genres that I mentioned, it does not do the proper character development, or it claims to be doing the proper character development, but it's not actually done well enough for me to actually believe what's happening in front of my face. It's rather frustrating, if I'm being honest, because I want to say maybe this movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes. What I've started doing is starting a timer, a stopwatch on my phone when a movie starts, if I know it has a runtime, so that I can pay attention to when I'm looking at the clock. 18 minutes in, I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, 18 minutes in, 30 minutes in, I'm looking at the clock. And then finally, about an hour and 4 minutes in, just before I looked at the clock, someone behind me audibly said out loud, "When is something gonna happen?" And that's kind of like that's this whole movie over and over again, waiting for something to happen and a lot of plans. Most heist movies start with a beginning heist, Then there's a middle heist. And then throughout the movie, you build up to the big heist at the end. Typically, the middle heist is where things go wrong. So there's a first heist that is successful. Cops are on their tails. Second heist, they do it again. The cops find them a little bit. And then they have to do the third heist. And that's the last one before they're like, get out of Dodge or whatever. That is the standard heist movie. If you've seen most of them, that's typically what they're like. And when I say heist, I mean like, I don't mean like Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. Those are different. Like those have like mini heists in the middle as they head towards a much bigger heist towards the end. Whereas this one, typically a bank robbery movie, think Heat or think The Town, or most movies that start with some sort of heist at the beginning. Even The Dark Knight follows this same thing where there's a heist at the beginning, then there's a heist in the middle at some point, some sort of like bigger like middle action. And actually, I think there was 2 heists in the middle of The Dark Knight. I have to think about it more. And then at the end, there's like a culminating heist in which we really got to find the bad guys and everyone, all the responsibility is going to be taken, all of that. So this movie, it fails because it has heist in the beginning and it has heist at the end, and the rest of the movie is jumping from group of people to other group of people, none of whom have the gravitas nor the face recognition for me to think of them as someone contributing anything valuable to this film. And I'm supposed to be following this thread from beginning to end. And it was tough. I mean, it was tough. The other thing that bothers me is that O'Shea Jackson Jr., while I like him, I am a fan of him as a human being alive and him continuing the legacy of nepotism that started with his father opening some doors for him. I'm sure he opened doors for himself. I don't even know. So let me not say that. Regardless, I don't think he's a leading man. They keep trying to convince me that he is a leading man. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I've seen him in several things and I'm just like, bro, you're not doing it for me. Like they have him doing multiple accents in this movie, which he cannot hold. He doesn't hold the accents so well that at one point I'm like, yo, he's talking regular. And I know like he's like inverting a couple of words or whatever. So I know he's supposed to have an accent right now, but it's so bad that at some point I'm like, hey man, like if he's supposed to be undercover, are we supposed to believe that they believe that he is like not he's a foreign national? Like that's what we're supposed to believe, but it's really bad. And I mean, it's like, it's not even laughably bad. It's like, hey man, this is your full-time job. Did you talk to somebody about this? Like, and honestly, I blame the director, because at some point the director should have yelled cut and been like, hey bro, that ain't gonna be it. You like got to go back to the linguist, because that accent is terrible, man. Like did you watch Black Panther, man? Like all of these people clocked into work. What are you doing out here, man? Like this is, and it's that from him. Gerard Butler plays the most irritating character on the face of the planet. I hated him in Den of Thieves, and he's kind of like this hard-nosed detective that'll do whatever it takes to get to the end. But it's Gerard Butler. We know he has a heart of gold, but he's playing this jerk character so much so that I'm just like, I don't like him until about 2/3 of the way through this movie. So I just want to be clear, through the entirety of Den of Thieves, nothing redemptive about this character. As a matter of fact, for the majority of Den of Thieves, the first one, I am rooting actively against the cops. Although that may not be limited to this movie, I found that recently in most films, I'm actively rooting against the cops. They have to make the bad guys really evil for me to not root against the cops. It's it's very tough for me to do that. That being said, watching this, I'm actively rooting against the cops from the first one. And in the second one, it's just like, I'm like, come on, man, just like be normal. And then like maybe two-thirds of the way through this second movie, he starts to be normal. And I'm like, okay, this is the Gerard Butler I want to see. I want to see charm. I want to see grittiness and toughness. I want that. But like whatever else is going on here is not working. Also, like both Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr., I don't know who's doing wardrobe, but none of their clothes fit right. None of their clothes fit right. And as a person as a fat person, I'm sitting here looking at them and I'm like, I don't think anyone is talking to them and saying, hey, you might need to let that shirt out a bit, period. And I'm not body shaming. It's okay to be fat, but y'all got to you're in Hollywood, man. Like you're not like a regular person. You have like a seamstress and wardrobe, and I assume you have a budget for all that. Like they keep putting them in clothes that I'm just like, yo, man, let that shirt out. It looks medium. Like, let it out. And it's not an issue of saying, like, hey, he looks fat. Like, these guys are husky dudes. That's not a problem. Let the shirt out, though, because it looks ill-fitting. And that's the biggest problem I had while looking at them walking around. I'm just like, and I don't know if they're, like, supposed to look that way, but one of them in the film is supposed to be very rich. Whereas Gerard Butler has probably more of an excuse because he's supposed to be, like, a haggard, tough-nosed cop. So, yeah, maybe I don't have time to think about fashion, that type of thing. But it just felt like one person should have looked at the camera and been like, hey man, I think we need some bigger shirts. That's it. And it's a simple request. And I know I have a whole nother show about body image and about weight, and I get that. I spend most of my life just being like, I just want my clothes to fit me properly. That's it. I want them to fit properly. I don't care if you could see that I have a gut or any of that. I'm saying, like, just get me a shirt that fits me. That's all. And if you give me an extra large, that's not gonna cut it. You need to put a couple more X's on there, and I'll be ready to go. And it just seems like they're in denial about that for themselves, which, like, results in them kind of like looking a little shabby on screen. And this is a big movie, you know what I mean? In February, and it's not February, it's January, but in January, February, it's kind of a dumping ground for movies. Movies don't really start to get good, and you'll see a couple of good ones pop out. It'll be the Oscar films that had the limited release in December, and then they have wide releases in January and February. I believe The Brutalist is about to come out, if I'm not mistaken, 3.5-hour movie, but it's about to come out. So you get those, but typically you get a lot of trash in January and February with really good trailers. So you get trailers that convince you to go to the theater, but yeah, I end up getting a lot of trash. This is trash. With all of that being said, it's a 2-star movie. It dropped to a 1-star movie at one point, and it dropped to a 1-star movie because there was no action. But when the action kicked up and they actually did the heist, I was like, actually, I'm not looking at my phone anymore. I'm focused on the film. I'm all the way immersed. Like, yeah, y'all did it. This is great. You did it. But that wasn't enough to make it something that I'd ever want to watch again. Like, I would never want to watch this again. So unfortunately, it doesn't rise to it. This should be a 3-star movie. This should be, I'm going to the movies, I'm walking in, this is pretty good, 3 stars. That's not what happened. It's a 2-star movie. So don't waste your time, honestly. I know if y'all are like, oh, I like the first one, just wait for this to come on streaming. Do not, unless you really, really, really have nothing to do. But I promise you, watching this 2-hour and 10-minute movie, it's gonna feel longer. When you sit down, you're just like, come on, man, could y'all like rob something or shoot someone, or can you stop doing that accent? All thoughts I had while I was in the theater. I was also in a theater full of black folks all shifting in their seats. People that, and I'm telling you, like, I know the people that come to this theater specifically, they come to be entertained. They were not entertained. They were talking about it audibly. There was a couple behind me that normally I'd be irritated by them talking, but they were like saying every time I was like, man, I should be upset with these people, but they kept speaking my thoughts out loud in a way that was actually kind of refreshing. So with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of Oh It's Big Ron Studios. I mixed this episode, and for this movie, I'm watching it on a Saturday. I'm going to mix this and post it tomorrow, and it'll be available on Monday per usual. Y'all know the schedule. This takes a lot of work on my part, and this wasn't a movie that was screened. I had to pay for a ticket to go in. If any of that matters to you, if you like listening to these reviews, if I become a part of your routine, consider becoming a member of the Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/leavingthetheater, you can join in there, or go to the link in our show notes. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Den of Thieves, Pantera, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, or Letterboxd at Oh It's Big Ron. That's at OHITSBIGRON. You can find out more about this show and other Oh It's Big Ron Studios shows by following us on Instagram at Oh It's Big Ron Studios. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening.